Yeah, so I wanted to talk this week about this month about people pleasers, because it is a phrase that comes up an awful lot, and I think it's a really important one, and it actually features in quite a lot of the coaching conversations that I have with people who are going through sort of, a big sort of career changes or big sort of career crossroads and relationship problems as well, where they come, well, yeah, I am a bit of a people pleaser, and so many people have said that to me over the years that I thought that it really needs to come out, and particularly from a personal perspective over the particularly the last 2 or 3 years. I've really sort of taken on this whole thing about the need for recognition and people pleasing, and adjusted my own way of interacting with the world as well. And I thought that might be quite useful to exercise that with a group of friends here tonight, to actually start to see what you make of it and see how you sort of regard this whole topic. But before we get too far into it, I think probably just to be quite clear, some of what follows, what I would like to think will be quite provocative, because it is quite some of the points that we've got to share here today are potentially quite controversial, in that they're not normal, and they sort of fly against the conventional culture that many of us inhabit, particularly in the Western world. And I mean, be prepared for that. But I want to do it in such a way that we sort of explore these ideas together with no rights or wrongs, but just to really give you a stop check to say, oh, am I approaching this in the right way, or have I sort of learned enough about this topic to be able to be free in the way I interact with the world? And so it could be a little bit fun. So I've tabled it as an hour, but I'm quite happy to extend, maybe to about quarter past, if that's okay, quarter past 7. If you guys are okay, if you just give me a nod of the head, are you okay to quarter past 7? Okay, well, let's just see how it goes. But I want to start with, and again, because it is a small group, I didn't expect it to be quite this small, but what attracted you to this topic? It certainly does. I mean, because, and as you may have caught on the second blog that I put out last week, about recognition, I think we're all conditioned to be people pleasers
Yeah.
through education and on through work, and certainly early years of the career. And I've noticed it in sort of coaching quite a lot of people who are just stepping up into the director position. That's quite a crossroads for people, and they get to the point where they're looking around who to please, and there's nobody to please, and they've got to make it up for themselves, and they think, oh, now what do I do? And it's almost like continuing in the theme of these sessions in terms of self empowerment, I think. And there comes a stage where you've got to stand in your own space, but maybe we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. And sometimes with points like that, I mean, about the value of respect, sometimes it's how we define it. And what I've done a lot of this in coaching work, that somehow it is possible to redefine what respect means,
Yeah.
and therefore allow you to do more of what you need to do without breaching that respect value. And I think sometimes that takes a conversation to sort of unravel, but not a long conversation, to actually then reorientate and go back into the field of battle. Because quite rightly, what you're saying is, from culture to culture, there are different norms of behaviour and expected behaviour that condition us to responding a different way. And we come out of one culture in another, and we've still got that legacy until we learn to, oh, okay, that's okay, right, now, and then you've got to remember, when you go back into the other culture, that you need to be a bit more, that they're sort of respectful rather than this sort of respectful. So it's quite a complicated area, but I think a lot of this is about awareness. But thanks for sharing that. Oh, that's fascinating, because you're raising so many very interesting points that I'd not thought about hitherto. And I thought, well, we'll crack through this in an hour, no problem. I can already see it stretching to 3 hours, because some of I mean, the whole. I mean, I have written about this, but not with the people please attack thing, but subordinates just giving you good news, or not wanting to disappoint you, and all sorts of things. I've written about that before, and you're absolutely right. Not only have you got to be careful about the extent to which you're people pleasing and how that impacts what you're trying to do, but the other people as well. well, and people beside you and even above you, because some bosses are trying to please their teams all the time, and I think that's counterproductive as well. So I think it's, if we can gain more awareness through at least this session, and maybe we'll continue it into the next session as well if there's enough material here to discuss, and I'm sure there is, and enough interest. But the more we can influence the culture around us to have more open, honest dialogue about what's going on and what needs to happen and things like that, I think the better. But there are also some deep psychological issues that need to be tackled, which I believe, and I said it on the post about the need to the seeking recognition. Personally, I think seeking recognition is a plague on the whole of society at the moment, and probably explains why we've got so many problems in the world, because everybody in the world is trying to please or trying to be pleased, and it's that dynamic that is wrong, rather than people standing in their own ground, standing on their own skills and capability and destiny, and actually then going back out to interact with the world. So there's some deeper stuff here as well. But to kick off, then I'm going to ask you a question. I mean, it may sound a bit obvious, but what is a people pleaser? Anybody like to kick that one off? How might we define one or recognise one? So it's almost like there's a boundary here,
Yeah.
where you're quite happy to speak your mind, but not disagree with people, because that might risk them disagreeing or not liking you. And maybe that's not so much people pleasing as not pleasing yourself enough, and
Yeah.
being clear about what your priorities are. But this whole thing of, not able to say no is a common facet. It's quite good that you're saying you're quite happy to share what's, so there is almost like a certain preparedness in what you're saying there for conflict or for disagreement, but not too far. So it's almost like, I mean, don't think we've talked in too much detail about the power balance, but when that power balance is perceived as being extremely favouring the other person, then anything they say goes. Yeah, and I have noticed that. I mean, in America, in contract negotiations, they always say yes, they can do it. But in the UK, it's not quite that extreme. And a senior friend of mine was saying, Colin, that's always the way. Americans always promise everything just to get the deal, and then it unravels later when they realise they can't afford it, or the pricing isn't right, and then we have problems to fix. And it's the American companies that tend to do that. British companies are a little bit more open about what they're capable of doing, and don't, I guess, try so hard to get the deal. There is an awful lot there, and one of the things that I'm picking up, and there are many things that I could pick up on what you said there, Lisa, is the whole thing about the what's going on in the culture. So if people are used to being punished for getting things wrong in that culture, then people are more likely to take a cautious approach and be a people pleaser. But also, what you're saying there about the confidence and competence, and I'm reminded of the Hersey Blanchard situational leadership model, and how somebody who is new to a job doesn't even know enough to be able to voice their concerns or their questions. They need to be shown, they need to be directed before they're then. So you need to get to a certain level of competence and confidence before you can push back and challenge and get these things out on the table. But I think all of those aspects can breed people pleasers. And since you were asking or making this particular point, Lisa, earlier on about subordinates, I think it's beholden upon us to make sure we do everything we can to get the culture in the right place, that people feel quite comfortable to do what they need to do and to say what they need to say in a very transparent way, which is very easy when you've got just a team in front of you or around you, but it's much more difficult when you're talking about inter-client relationships and a bigger organisation where there are a lot of different actors, because everybody will have I suppose their own sort of measure of how much they want to please other people or specific people based on their calculations. And it's reminding me of something that we were talking about last time, which is about with hostile characters, that there's always a positive intent. and there must be a positive intent behind the people pleaser and what they're trying to do. And maybe part of our work as we interact with people, be they people pleasers or people displeasers, one could say, is trying to uncover what's going on for them. But I did, when I was sort of doing a little bit of digging earlier on today, I did come out with a quite a nice, oh, how do we do this? Quite a nice list. And it's not mine, but take a look at this. The indicators of I'll post a link later on so you can dig beneath the surface on these, and I'm not going to belabour any of them, but if there's any you want to particularly pick out, but the first set is really all about no, and not saying no, as Claire was saying, and that's almost like a a pathological thing. No, I can't. I've got to say yes all the time, or whatever. But the second point here is trying to avoid situations where a no is when the individual is under pressure to say no. So actually dodging things, avoiding things, not answering emails, not confronting situations where they might feel they need to say no, or get into a position where they're saying another yes and there's another hour disappearing from their evenings, or something like that, which I think was quite. This list also went on with physical reactions to letting people down, and when I read that, I thought that's such a powerful one, because a lot of people that I've spoken to over the years really do feel it quite deeply, that then they're almost shamed or guilty if they're letting other people down, particularly when it comes to seniors, as if they're doing a bad thing, and that can have a physiological effect as well, with the heart racing, the stress levels going up. So I thought that was quite an interesting one to note. And the number 4 there, I think, is really important, and I'd love to do some more on this, and maybe if we get time, listen to some of your reactions on this. But this whole thing about personal boundaries is not something I'd really thought too much about. But what this author was talking about was actually being very clear how you want people to treat you. And how you don't want people to treat you. And I think what they're saying here is that if you haven't done that thinking, if you haven't grounded down where your boundaries are, then you're quite often responding in that confusion, and probably allowing things to happen that you perhaps feel bad about later on. So there's regret, I wish I'd said no, or I've taken on too much, or something like that. And I think that can then have downstream consequences, either for an increased risk that you'll let people down, or increased health risks, or stress, or overwork, or something else falling over while you try to juggle the pleasing, because you can't please all of the people all of the time, can you? as we know. So something's got to give, but I wonder what would give. Agreeing to things that you don't like. This is an interesting one. Calling others selfish. And this is really, what I really like about this idea is that, because you do hear that, don't you? Well, other people are selfish. They're all asking, it's all me, and what about me and my needs? And what I took from this was that with a people pleaser, I think quite often there is that lack of responsibility, lack of taking it on themselves, that they've got to manage themselves, they've got to manage their boundaries and their agenda and their priorities and their objectives as well, in the light of what's going on in the environment. And I think one of the links I shared with you last week was about unrealistic demands and how to respond to that, and we did talk about that a little bit last month as well. And I think that's really, really important. But if we're just putting it out there and saying it's everybody else, not me, until we sort of say, no, okay, there's me in this, and I'm probably a bigger influence on what's going on than anything. It's a bit like we were talking last time about bullies as well, and victims. Until the victims start to take a different approach to life and to the engagement with said characters, then nothing is really going to change. So I think with being a people pleaser, I think there's an opportunity here to take some responsibility. This is a phenomenon or an experience that is happening to you, and you can do something about it by taking responsibility and maybe taking different decisions. But we'll get to more of that a little bit later. Often exhausted and stressed, which is rarely delegating. That was an interesting one to see. And I'm not quite sure I understand where they were coming from, but I guess it's probably downstream, not wanting to upset people, not wanting to overload them, not wanting to overwhelm them. Therefore, I'll keep it in the monkey on my back. I'll do it because I can do it quicker as well, and I don't want to trouble them. And I remember an ops director in one of the train companies I was coaching, and she was really, really struggling with a team performance because she wasn't delegating it down, because she didn't want to upset them. they've got enough to do and they've got trouble, and that one's got some problems in their personal life and all of this, that, and the other. So pleasing downstream as well as upstream can be a problem. And I think um, oh, don't we all do this comparing to other people? Well, maybe we do to a different extent, but I think what this is saying is for people pleasers, they're much more likely, I think, to be self-critical and putting themselves down, and it relates back to some of the things we've already touched on about that lack of confidence, lack of worth, lack of self-value. And I think because it's innate in all of us to compare with other people around us, particularly peers and friends and things like that, or they're doing so much better than me and things like that, then that's again another dent to the confidence when you're looking out at the world and thinking everybody's better at this than I am. And I think the last two there, feeling underappreciated goes without saying, because that's sort of because you're not valued when people are just dumping on you, asking for things, and you're just saying yes all the time. Where are you in all of this? Where is your sense of self and sense of ownership and purpose, I guess? And this whole thing about being criticised, because I think that one is about compounding that, or maybe a little bit of a defensive measure to try to protect what little self-worth there might still be there. So being criticized is something that might be pushed out. But that's what I found on this other blog, and I'll share the link with you later. But what do you make of all of that? Yeah, and I think my response to that, I mean, I'm not sure what the question was, but the way I'll respond to that is that I think in that new group, because group dynamics and psychology is really important for us to be acutely aware of when we're going from group to group, even if it's just on a temporary basis, but certainly when it's on a job basis. And I think the point is, going in, one would hope, particularly if you've thought about this before, you've got your clear boundaries in place. You understand what they are. Then you can go into a situation where you are a bit sensitive to the new environment. Well, I know this is my value and I don't like that boundary being breached, but on this occasion, or I'll manage it in this way. I'll say more of a tentative yes to something like that might, because I don't yet know this, that, or the other. When I do, so it's almost like being more proactive or more conscious of managing those boundaries, because boundaries can't be too strict, because the boundaries have to allow us to succeed in the culture where we want to be successful. Okay, so there has to be a bit of a trade-off. Otherwise, you are rigid, you are too strict, and people can't work with you. Depending on what the boundaries are. So I think in any new situation, you've got to be just sensitive. But if you don't know what your starting point is, then it's just see what happens. And hopefully I'll come out in the right way. But again, one of the actions would be, as quickly as possible, re-establish the boundaries or the set points in the way you want to interact with the world in that new environment, and do that as a matter of priority, and start to get that feel. And it's a bit like with the confidence, and I say on many occasions, what is it that's stopping you being totally confident in this situation or in this organisation, in this group? Right, high priority development areas, learn whatever it is you need to learn, get to know whoever you need to get to know as fast as possible. Learn to understand the politics would be a key part, and how decisions get made, and then you can have a bit more. So you're almost like shortening the time span between entry and re-establishment of those boundaries, whatever they then have morphed into, would be my response. I think you're right here. I mean, there are degrees, and this is this is an exhaustive list of all the things that could be prominent in a people pleaser, and we are using people pleaser as, I guess, a derogatory term for something that's not necessarily a good idea, but there are occasions when it is a good idea. And I think it's a bit like business schools and models and things like that, and frameworks. They're there to get you thinking. And so today we're talking about people pleaser as a topic, and there's a lot of crossovers. There's a lot of other strands to this, and I don't think we ought to get too paranoid about it. But I think there are some real interesting threads here that are quite consistent in my view, and the key one here is that need to be liked or need to be recognised. and that's where it also starts to lead the way in terms of resetting if you like, the contract with yourself and the world. So who
Yeah.
you are and how you want to be in the world, and I think that that is the secret, pill, if you like, to starting to resolve some of these, so that you become a professional in a role, doing your best to deliver to the needs of the organisation and all who sail in her, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to sway from this. So
Yes.
therefore, any recognition will come as a result of doing a good job, which is what we want, really, isn't it? A meritocracy. And if it doesn't come, fine, I'll take that skill somewhere else, as Lisa was saying last time. I'm quite happy to walk out the door and go and find another job, and I've never had a problem with that before. Brilliant. It means you've got that real strong base of confidence then to say, no, this is what I'm here to do. This is what I am going to do. And if you like it, and if you don't, that's up to you. But this is what I think the organisation needs. That requires quite a lot of work to get to that level of confidence. But I think that's the destination. I don't think anybody totally gets there, but the closer you can get, or even just seeing it as a goal, as an aim, to get to that sort of level of freedom. Yeah, because
With
being
people
face
that
to
you,
face, I mean,
yeah.
physically together, that is a different dynamic altogether. I mean, to the other extreme of sending text messages or something like that. However, the danger is you can't moderate or react to the reaction to the no if you're doing it remotely, because you've got less information coming. The only thing that's different is you've got less coming back. So you deliver
No.
the no, and you've got less coming back. So it's less immediate reaction. Doesn't mean to say the reaction isn't there and isn't going to
Yeah.
have to be dealt with at some point in time. The problem is when you do get a reaction that is evident, it's then even more difficult to counter it. So that's why face to face you can start to tell them what's going on with their eyes and the way they're moving and the way they're breathing, and you think, holy, well, I've really gone too far here. And then, oh no, it's not quite that. That's not quite what I meant. And you've got a lot more ability to be able to manage that reaction. And I think
Yeah.
without that sort of instantaneous reaction and feedback on every channel, from voice tone to body language
Yes.
and things like that, you've got a lot more information a lot less information to then moderate correct understanding and things like that in that remote
Yeah.
world.
So
Because what was it that was just reminding me of that song? Was it 101 Ways to Leave Your Lover or something like that? 101 Ways to Say No, isn't there? No, no, no. And straight away you've got three there, and there could be a million other different ways of actually saying no. And I think exercising the skill of saying no is a really important one to do. And it could be as simple as, no, I can't do that, but I could do this. No, I can't do it in that way or with that request, but can we talk about how we might modify the request to fit in with the other schedule or something like that? Or no, I can't do it, but if we can get somebody else alongside me, then maybe we can talk. And so you get it into almost like a negotiation, because the other important thing, and I think we did touch on this last time, is when somebody comes with an ask to you, you have the power. You have the power. But if you just say yes, you've given it straight back again. Okay, well, you want that, so why? What's going on behind that? What's the real ask here? What's the deadline? What the other pressures around it? And in that inquiry, before you get to a yes or a no, you can find an awful lot more information out to help you say no. If you realise, well, that's not really, I understand you want it done, and I think, it needs to be done, and I totally agree with you, but I'm probably not the best person to do it anyway. If you go over there, and those sort of people, they're really well equipped. And if you want me to stay beside it, if you can go and get them to do it, they can consult with me and I can help it along for you. So there's all sorts of different ways, isn't there? Well, I'm going to for a bit of fun. I'm going to slightly disagree with you there, Lisa, because something you said last time was about deadlines and dates, and they hear the date and
yes.
straight away they get it. They don't hear the caveats. So they might
Correct.
hear the yes and not hear the caveats. So they
Right.
might only hear yes. So it's slightly sort of inconsistent on that, and I think it's one to be careful of, because I think once they hear the yes, okay, well, I'm off. She's going to do it. Yeah, okay, she's got some things to sort out, but she can do that, and I'm off. If they hear the no, they might keep listening, particularly if it's coming from on high, and they hear, no, hang on, I've still got some more work to do here, so I need to convince her to do it, or so they're still engaged in trying to get out what they want. It's like, I think I mentioned the project manager Patrick over in Canada that I was working with. A lot of people used to come to him saying, can you do this or that, and he had to make the decision, can I do it or not, can I fix it or not. He was a fixer, and he used to say yes or no. But at the time that the director was asking him for it, he had the power, and they had to, and so if he said no, they'd probably come back and say, well, are you sure? And, oh, I really need this done. And they had the need, so supply and demand. And so if they are coming to you with a request, you have power to say no, or to start to negotiate conditions or what's going on around it. So, and they'll keep talking. So just another. And I think, another point, sort of developing it further, is that, I'd love to say yes. Isn't quite yes. I'd love to say yes, but before I do, I need to understand this, or I need to dig into this a little bit, because I want to give you an accurate yes, and a yes that you can totally, totally depend on. And I'm still a little unclear about what's required here. You know, it's showing you want to please. It's showing you want to deliver value, all right, and that you're really passionate about delivering. I'd love, but it's that caveat, because you haven't quite said, you sort of negates it a little bit, and I think that's another way. But there's lots of different ways. But the point about all of this is, if you are towards the people pleaser end of the spectrum, or arguably anywhere, this is an area of performance that needs to rise to help you maintain control of what's in front of you and what you're being asked to do and what you're actually doing. So it's almost like a necessary skill for everybody to develop, because it can swing the other way, and people can be saying no all the time and displeasing everybody to an extraordinary extent, and that of course can be career limiting and very damaging as well. So getting that nuance, balance, delivery of deciding on your priorities and accepting or declining on requests, I think is a really important skill to polish. Yeah, and once it's gone, it's gone. And
Yeah.
recovery is very difficult. I mean, another technique I used to use, and I coach quite a lot of people to use, very, very simple. And I still do this when I'm under pressure and I've got more to do than I have time to do. But in corporate life, it was especially useful. I just used to have a piece of A4, so a piece of paper, 5 columns for the days of the week, and I just used to use a pen and start to box things out, my time, not just the meetings, but the time that I was going to spend working on this project or that project. And I did that because I thought, well, I've only got I've got to keep all of these going, and they've all got to be moving at a pace. But what happened in the end was, I used to be able to time box the activity, so one activity didn't push the others out, and at the end of the time box, now I need to make another decision. If I need to spend more time, where am I going to slot that in? But the most important thing relevant to this is, when my boss came to ask me to do something else, I said, okay, Ian, what gives? And I said, well, this is what I'm doing at the moment. This is my plan. I've got an hour there and an hour there, or I could cross that one out. Oh, no, 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 you can't cross. Oh, so it's almost like engaging the boss in that decision making priority, because you can't turn round and just say, boss, I've got too much to do. You've already asked me to do too much, because that's subjective. If you've got something in front of you that you can say, okay, well, look, here it is. Here's what I'm managing and coping with at the moment, and I'm being very effective and efficient, but something will have to give. If you want, or shall we drop that one down on the priority list? Okay, right, well, we drop that one down on the priority list then, and then I'll give it an hour today, do a provisional sort of scoping or whatever, and then we'll talk again tomorrow and see whether we need to get some more resource in for this. Because quite often the requests coming from above are not really thought out. they're not planned, they're not factored into everything else because they're just responsive and reacting to their political environment, aren't they? So it's really difficult. But that was one way that I could talk in more detail about how I did that. But one lady I was coaching over in Frankfurt, she used to put it on her office door so that everybody could see what she was up to. And so her subordinates knew when she was busy or when she wasn't, or when there was a slot coming up. And I know it's not fitting in today's sort of technology terms, but I tell you what, a bit of paper goes an awful long way in this world, even now. And I think that was quite a useful little technique. But I thought I'd share that with you at this point. Any thoughts? Yeah, and part of it is about and part of the way of and again this is something that needs to be talked through in a coaching sort of context more than anything, but just as general thoughts for you, it's almost like the answer to that is the degree to which you are detached from the result of your pushback. If they don't like it, tough. I'm not concerned about it. And part of the trap is we are trapped into having a vested interest in them being pleased. And I think what's important there is that we're talking about an ideal and a destination that if everybody could get, the world would be a different place. But I think it's something that we should all aspire to or recognise as a place where we want to increasingly inhabit, where we have that level of confidence that we don't mind. Nobody wants to displease people. Everybody wants to be liked, but this is almost getting to the stage where, that's up to them, because I'm sure enough about what I'm doing, what I think needs to happen here in these circumstances to meet the needs of the organisation in that situation. And if they don't like it, well, I'm not going to do anything different. This is my professional opinion and this is what I think, and if they don't want me to do that, then we need to have a different conversation, or I'm just going to get the hell out of it because somebody else was on the phone only the other day wanted to recruit me, or well, I'll go and do some gardening for a while, or I'll go and do some missionary work, or something like that. To have that, I think to arrive at that position in life, brilliant. If you can get there, and a lot of people never get there. A lot of people only get there when they've given up everything else and they don't care anymore and they're into retirement. Oh, sod it, But other people get there in a very happy place, where they're quite happy to continue interacting with the world, but on a different basis. And I think that's where the real sort of destination is. I think for mental health, emotional health, physical health, the works. It ticks all of my boxes if you can get to that position. But at least just knowing that destination, you can then ask the next question, well, how do I move towards it? How do I move towards it? And I have, one of the biggest problems for people in big companies, in my opinion, I'm getting a bit of a soapbox towards the end of this session, so forgive me for that, is that people are too internally focused on their current company rather than their life and their career and what's going on outside. And it's great with you guys, doing an MBA and things like that, because you get such a wealth of other stimuli on other industries and other occupations and other professions and things like that. But have you done enough that you could walk out of your job today without a care, without worrying too much, because you could transfer your skills into the next industry because you've already got half a dozen friends over there who are probably quite interested in fact, they may have even had conversations, well, Trevini, would you like to come over here and work with us? You could get there. And I tell you what, the interesting thing, when I've coached people to do that, to get to that stage, they actually make bigger progress in their current company because they're not so afraid. They're not so trying to please everybody else. They're a little bit more confident that they've got a vision of where the company needs to go or what their unit needs to be doing. They get that gravitas because they know there's a plan B, C, D, E, Z, and it's all there. And I think if you can move towards that, you're onto a winner. I'm not sure I'm going to show them all because we're nearly at the end of our allotted time anyway. But let me just sort of tease you with a couple of other things here. I mean, this is an important quote that I picked up from one of the articles I saw earlier on about setting boundaries does not mean we become selfish. It means we become assertive, confident, and have self-awareness to and encourage our own self. Well, I mean, I think this is an important thing. It's a bit like, a lot of people keep saying, you're too nice. You're too nice to get on in the world and things like that. And people who are they're labelled too nice, saying, well, that means they're asking me to be horrible. No, they're not. They're asking you to just man up a bit and just stand your ground and to be more assertive. And it's a bit like that's what's going on here. The stronger you are, the more clear you can be about where those boundaries are and what you can do and what you can't do. Actually, the more respect you'll get, because you're actually, Tribini, you're giving them respect by not overcommitting, by not trying to do things that you might not be able to do. You're honouring their time and their respect in you, and they're asking you, their faith in you, by giving them a straight answer and being very transparent with them. And to me, this is a little bit of reinterpreting the value of respect. That's respectful. If people are going to stand up to me and say, Colin, no, you're asking too much here. I'm not going to be able to deliver. I'd love to be able to, but in these circumstances, no, and I don't want to let you down. I think that's a very respectful behaviour. I might not be happy about it, I might not like it, but I'd sooner know now, and then I can go and recruit somebody else, or I can get you some help, or I can get you some support. I know what I'm dealing with, rather than hearing the yes and thinking, oh, okay, that's all right, then I'll carry on with all these other things, and then get let down later on, or you burn out. What's the point of that? If you burn out or fall over, I can't do anything about that then as a senior manager. I've got to then do some damage limitation, or I haven't planned for the contingency. So that's sort of just fiddling about with those values and interpretation, I think, a little bit, and you might want to go a little bit deeper into that if that's resonating with you. What else? Because we're towards the end of the allotted time, and I've got to get on to something else in a moment. What I was going to ask you about was the benefits. So you might want to think about this, and I think we'll do a part 2 of this next month. Okay, so we'll come back to this next month because there's a lot more that I want to discuss that I haven't had a chance to sort of share with you as well. But remember, we were talking about positive intent. Anybody who is being a people pleaser, if that's you or a subordinate or a boss or a client or a supplier, they're going to have some benefit. They're going to be doing it for a reason. All right, that may be misguided. It may be, lack of maturity or lack of confidence or whatever, but they're doing it for positive intent. But what is that positive intent? So if you can ask that question of yourself, Claire, why do you keep saying yes? Why are you afraid or not willing to say no to senior management? How do you benefit from that approach? Well, probably you might be thinking, well, I get a lot more attention, or I'm more likely to be offered another position, or another role, or another opportunity, or I might get I don't know whether this works in your organisation, might get a bigger bonus or better performance review or something like that if I keep doing it. That's the calculation you've made. However, with awareness, you might think, yeah, but I could make things really much worse for myself by not delivering on the important things. So missing the boat, or not standing for something because I'm just a yes person. I'm just saying yes all the time, and therefore it could damage my reputation. So if you are tending towards this, think about the pros and the cons and why you are doing what you're doing at the moment. Reevaluate and try and apply some logic, because most of those subconscious, more emotional decisions, in my experience, rather than logical ones. So when you map out the logic, you might think, I've been a bloody idiot here. Absolutely. And you've got the skill. This is the thing is, all of you have got these skills to say no. I'll bet you say no in your personal life. You don't have to answer that, but I'm sure you do. Therefore, you've got the skill to be able to say it. Why can I say no in my personal life and not in my professional life? Oh, okay, well, what's the difference here? Oh, okay, well, yeah. And then you're starting to work out how to give yourself permission to be a little bit less, is it sycophantic? No, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Yeah, a little
agreeable.
bit agreeable. That's it. That's a very, very agreeable term. So think about the benefits, and the other thing is think about the drawbacks, because there are a lot of drawbacks, from that we've touched on as well: burnout, stress, doing too much, overcommitting, letting down on other things. losing respect of other people, because one can fairly safely assume that people who are more senior are probably less likely to be people pleasers. They might be. I can see, they might be schmoozing and sort of sliding up that greasy pole and, sucking their way up by pleasing the right people. But I bet there's an awful lot of people they're not prepared to please or not bothered about. Because I'd like to think anyway, in today's world, there is less opportunity for people pleasers to move up. Because it's about hard results, getting the money coming in, or the costs down, or the projects landed and things like that. I'd like to think that. I think it is increasingly that way, and less likely that people with lack of substance can get to the top. So I think it's fairly safe to assume, like we assume when we're talking about the influence style, that people are probably less tactful and diplomatic, more favouring determination. I think it's a reasonable thing that we can assume. So therefore, if you want to gain the respect of your seniors and they're not people pleasers, then you need to stop pleasing them so much. And one example I can share with you, they was giving, somebody I was coaching was saying, we took the team to meet this senior exec in Switzerland, and when he said, this is what we want to do, I piped up in a very strong voice saying, Andy, absolutely no way are we going to do that. And my team ducked because they thought, because this guy had such a fearsome reputation. And he turned around and said, brilliant, why's that? And he wanted that pushback. He needed that challenge, as Lisa was saying earlier on. That honesty and transparency needs to get through. And sometimes these characters at the top are very, very assertive, bordering on aggressive, very demanding, and it takes a lot of strength to be able to stand up to them. But when you do stand up to them, they respect it. So I'm going to stop there, because why do people do it is sort of in the benefits, I guess. But I was going to get to, here's the final one to leave with you, which really does resonate, doesn't it? You see Trevini laughing there, because it's a surefire indicator, I think, that someone doesn't know their value. Because if they knew their value, they'd stand their ground, they'd protect their boundaries, they'd know their boundaries a little bit better. Which starts to lead to some of the clues that I was going to get to, but I'll leave to part two about what you can do about this to start to improve it. But we've touched on a lot of it, but I'm going to leave it for next time, if that's okay. So any thoughts, reactions or questions at this stage before we start to sign off?